My name's L.R. Smith. I teach history at the Webb School in Bell Buckle, Tennessee, down in Bedford County, below Nashville. Webb School was founded in 1870 by a guy named William R. Sawney Webb. Sawney Webb had a son, William R. Webb Jr., whom we fondly refer to as Son Will. Son Will took over the school as his father aged. And during the Great War, Son Will was in his mid-40s, and pretty much running the school, was beyond draft age, and so he became a civilian volunteer with the Committee on Public Information, which was the government propaganda agency. That Son Will became what is known as a 4-minute man. The job of the 4-minute men was to literally stand up in movie theaters during the real change and give a 4-minute talk on why we are at war, why we need to be at war, what we need to do to help the war effort, and in particular, why we need to buy war bonds to support the war effort. As part of his duties as a 4-minute man, Son Will also bought large quantities of slides, glass slides, which the Committee of Public Information put out, and put them together in slideshows, which illustrated various themes about what we were doing in the war effort, and once again, why we needed to buy bonds. The school has a large collection of Son Will's Committee on Public Information slides and one of his presentations. That he would take this slideshow around Bedford County to anyone who would listen. Church groups, social groups, Rotary, you name it. And present these slides on that machine right there, which by the way still works. We're just not using it. We've digitized the slides now. These presentations were free to the public, except they did expect a donation to the Red Cross when it was over. So what I'm going to do for about the next hour is simply channel William R. Webb Jr., Son Will. That's going to give you his talk, and this will give you an insight into the feeling in Middle Tennessee about what this war was about, what the government wanted the civilian population to do during the war, to help the war effort, etc. So listen to it and see if you can pick out some themes that the Committee on Public Information wanted the public to know. This is the way the public found out about the American war effort. And so, without further ado, here, these are the words of William R. Webb Jr. of the 4-Minute Men. These are official war slides coming to you from the U.S. government, Committee on Public Information. When, after 2.5 years of ever-increasing provocation, our leaders and the great majority of the thoughtful people of our country felt that further delay in declaring war against Germany and the ideals for which he stands would be fatal, President Wilson, on April 2nd, 1917, called a joint session of Congress, forcefully reviewed the long list of criminal charges against that nation. In view of these crimes, not only against us, but against all civilization, both the Senate and House of Representatives passed by overwhelming majorities the following resolution, which was approved by the President on the 6th. Whereas the Imperial German government has committed repeated acts of war against the government and the people of the United States of America, therefore be it resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled that the state of war between the United States and the Imperial German government, which has thus been thrust upon the United States, is hereby formally declared. and that the President be, and he is hereby, authorized and directed to employ the entire naval and military forces of the United States and the resources of the government to carry on war against the Imperial German government and to bring the conflict to a successful termination. All of the resources of the country are hereby pledged by the Congress of the United States. A little over a month later, the Selective Service Act was authorized, and our boys and men without distinction as to social or financial position were called from their vocations to the training camps. And as they left their hometowns for the encampment, the prophecy made by Representative E.S. Root during the debate in the House was fulfilled when he said, "He will walk out from his community, and his neighbors will point to him and say, 'There is a man who has been chosen by our country for distinguished service. He is going to fight for us.'" So they came, our defenders, from Fifth Avenue and the Bowery, from Key West and Nome, from the mountains and the plains, from the college and the colliery, and accepted the sacred commission entrusted to them. They put off their civilian clothes and careless physical deportment and put on the military uniform and assumed the erect bearing of the soldier. Camps sprang up all over the country as if by some magic touch to receive this host of men. The one shown here was devoted to the training of officers for the new army, and the transformation in these men was as marked as in the ranks of the privates drilled at other camps. Soon, these men, accustomed to riding to their work on streetcars or in their own automobiles, were inured to marching uphill and down dale at double quick, with bayonets set in preparation for their future work over there. We can pause only to glance at a few of these busy cantonments as we are anxious to get to the front lines with our men across the sea. This view of a machine gun regiment in one of our training cantonments will suffice to indicate the extent and variety of the training on this side. Secretly, our boys board transports somewhere in America. We would all like to gather at the dock and bid them Godspeed, especially those who are near and dear to us. But for their safety, we must deny ourselves and learn to say with a smile, as the French do, "It is the war." For obvious reasons, pictures of our transports as they cross cannot be shown. This view, however, of some of our Marines, the first to fight, as they join in the religious services on a Sunday morning as they are on the way across, we are permitted to see. The expression on the boys' faces is serious, but not gloomy. War turns all hearts to thoughts of higher things and will be the making of many a man in our new army. So our boys by the thousands, yes, by the hundreds of thousands, are crossing the sea with joke and song and prayer and the best submarine protection the best Navy in the world can give. The first of our regular troops arrived safely in England, and as they marched through the streets of London, led by a British military band, they broke our provincial shell of political isolation, and the United States took its place in the great world family of nations. We now stand shoulder to shoulder with England, France, Italy, and the rest of our allies to make the world safe for the small as well as the big brother in this family. However, England was not our goal. We are on our way to Berlin via France and Belgium. The Rainbow Division was the first considerable number of our men to reach French soil. And although they reached there as unheralded as they had left here, the news of their arrival spread like wildfire through the seaport town where they disembarked, and a royal welcome greeted them. Our boys are now arriving on French soil in a constantly increasing stream, and as they pass from the pier to the town, they are greeted by an invitation in plain English to accept the hospitality of the YMCA. The work of this association and of the Knights of Columbus is a godsend to our boys over there who are strangers in a strange land, many of them never before having traveled outside their home state. At the seaports and other places in France frequented by our soldiers, the YMCA has established canteens where the men can buy, at cost, goodies just like those mother and sister used to make. Here they can exchange their United States money for French coin and obtain the latest news from home. Here are also posted notices of moving picture shows and other entertainments prepared for them. The United States Naval Men's Club is another organization which is doing much to safeguard our sailors and give them the wholesome amusement and recreation they need. For the improvised combination theater and gymnasium which they provide, not only amateur but often professional talent is available from our own men, and excellent entertainment is furnished. No army has been so well protected by moral safeguards as ours is at the present time, in both the training camps on this side and on the other. From the first, our soldier boys have been hailed by the French populace in the cities and towns through which they march as the deliverers of France. The strains of the Star-Spangled Banner and Dixie resounding through their streets have stirred the enthusiasm of the crowds to a high pitch, and a clamorous welcome has everywhere been extended to our boys in olive drab, whom we have sent to repay our debt of revolutionary times, and, in part, the more recent debt we owe them for their defense of liberty during the 3 years before we entered the present war. As soon as our soldiers reach France, they come under the direct command of General Pershing, who is seen here inspecting some of our troops who have recently arrived. Without long delay, the men are transported to the training camps with many jests about the French freight cars, which are so diminutive beside ours. They're a jolly set, full of enthusiasm as they speed toward their last training camp before graduating into the actual fighting forces at the front. The crowds are both interesting and interested. You will note the significant lack of men. There are boys and girls, and women and old men, but no young or middle-aged men, for France has given her all. Her able-bodied men to fight, the women, old men and boys and girls to labor in the fields and factories, and skimp and save for our freedom as well as their own. Should we sacrifice in this country as our ally France has done, or even half as much, the power we could exert would speedily drive the Germans and their puppet allies from France, Belgium, Italy, and Serbia, and crush their autocratic power. At every town in France, they're welcomed whether they come afoot, by train, or auto truck. As the great trucks loaded with our soldier boys rumble through the erstwhile quiet villages, they pass between rows of cheering people and under banners of welcome, decorated with our stars and stripes and the tricolor of France. In other villages, it was like a triumphal procession as the girls brought flowers and bouquets for our men, sometimes strowing the way with wild flowers, one thing which does not have to be conserved in France. Some of our men, especially among the Marines, can talk French, and you may depend on them to spread glowing descriptions with American embellishments of the wonders of our country. This group of French women are taking it all in, frills and facts, especially the frills. These noble souls, dwelling in the shadow of this terrible war, idolize our men on whom they are basing great hopes. They hail them as their deliverers, and these, our brothers, sons, and husbands, will make good over there if we do our part over here. In these villages where our men are quartered during their intensive training, the spirit of fraternity and comradeship between the poilus and our men is everywhere evident. The bond of language is exceedingly weak, but that of genuine friendship between comrades in arms is doubly strong. As we watch this French woman on her knees beside the stream washing one of our soldiers' uniforms, we involuntarily think, God bless you and your brave countrymen. And having thought that, let us transform the thought into action so that it will mean something tangible in advancing our righteous cause. Sisterly love, as well as brotherly fraternity, is to be seen wherever our soldiers stop. For khaki suits attract the girls over there just as they do over here. Their tongues over there do not talk the same language, but a smile is a smile the world round. Note the soldier on the bank near the center of the picture talking with the little boy. He is doubtless thinking about his small brother in the cottage back in the States, and the French boy little dreams how much he is strengthening the morale of one of our men, and so is involuntarily contributing to the cause of freedom. There is no need to mention the nationality of this group of soldiers. "Strike one," bawled out by the umpire, and the derisive yell, "You can't hit a balloon," from the sidelines takes them all thousands of miles away from the war to the old ballpark at home sweet home. The value of recreation for our soldiers is not liable to be overestimated, and the recent shipment of 79,680 baseballs, 19,000 bats, 10,000 gloves and mitts, besides volleyballs and other apparatus for recreation and sports, will do more to lick the Kaiser than one would imagine. Among sports, baseball is typically American, and in firearms, the revolver is typically our weapon and is proving very effective under certain conditions. The form of this weapon which we use is of special interest to the French, some of whom are here seen examining the revolvers belonging to our military police in one of the towns where our men are billeted. These days of intensive training are extremely strenuous. There are drills, long hikes, target practice, bomb throwing, trench digging, training for special attacks and raids, and other operations. At the end of a day's-long hike, the men, in this case Marines, return to the little town like this one on the Aisne, which is temporarily sheltering them. When taps are sounded, there will be no slackers. All this training, the forced marches to attack an imaginary foe and other maneuvers become irksome, and it is with cheers that the news that they are to move to the active front is received. Possibly before they leave, there will be a review by the colonel of the regiment when he can note the improvement the training has wrought on his men as they march by. Everything and everybody is ready for the move to the front at the last stage of the training under fire to endure their nerves for the ordeal of going over the top, as the other training has inured their muscles. The motorcycle squad, our swift messengers, speed ahead through half-deserted villages near the front. The heavy artillery gets underway and rumbles through the streets, across the bridge, and down the road to take up its position on our sector of the front. They pass through many quiet little villages as yet untouched by the ravages of shot and shell. In some of these, they halt to rest and then push on, ever towards the front. They are but one of the innumerable streams flowing forward in a mighty current to fight our fight. In another section of the column come the baggage wagons, and as they roll through the village streets, the children watch the procession with wondering eyes, little comprehending the momentous times in the midst of which they are living. Their smiles and cheers, however, have strengthened the resolve in many a soldier's heart to crush Prussian tyranny and make the world a safe place to live for these children and their own at home. There is incalculable power in the smile of a child. The largest part of our army, the infantry, now comes marching through a town which serves as the headquarters of one of our divisions. The French lassie on the sidewalk, keeping pace with the front rank, is doubtless dreaming of the time when she can be a Red Cross nurse, and the two boys in the road of the time when they grow up and can march with a gun on their shoulder to fight for their country and win a war cross for themselves. God grant that our soldiers, with those of our allies, may fulfill their mission so well that the coming generations may never have to fight with gun and bayonet for national rights or liberties. At last, the war zone is reached, and our soldiers get their first glimpse of the blasting effects of war. Here they are in the ruined town of Beaumont, and as they wander through its deserted streets, they thank their guiding star that the war is so far from their native home back in the States. Other towns where our men are stationed are in an even worse state of desolation. Here, the cathedral and the surrounding buildings have been razed to the ground, with scarcely one stone left upon another. This is but one of many such villages along the front on which the terrible blight of war has fallen. We cannot comprehend war's unspeakable desolation as we view it from so great a distance. As near to the front as the Army officers think advisable, YMCA huts are erected. The importance of the work done by such organizations as the YMCA and the Knights of Columbus is exceedingly great. For what a soldier does during his hours off active duty determines to a large extent what he will do later in the active service. In other words, it affects his morale. Here, soldiers can come and read and write. Here, they will find the books and magazines you are contributing. It is an oasis in the desert of war. The work of the YMCA is directed from their headquarters in Paris, which is located in a palatial hut. Here, the latch string is always out for the men on furlough. While the YMCA huts near the lines serve the soldiers when off duty for short periods, there is need for more such home-like places in the large cities where they come when on furlough and are subjected to great temptations. In Paris, the YMCA has established some luncheon huts or sidewalk cafes where hot chocolate is served at 6 cents a cup, ice cream for 20 cents, and jelly roll at 4 cents a slice. However, the free part, a chance to chat for a few minutes with a good, wholesome American man or woman, is the main object of these rest and luncheon booths. The refreshments are secondary. The British home for the soldiers on furlough in Paris is called Blighty, and its work during the war has amply proved its value. The morale and morals of our troops are closely allied. So when the hat is passed for the support of the activities of these organizations, do your bit and a little more. In the shelters just outside the danger zone, but still within the sound of the cannon, music often calms the shattered nerves of the men, among whom there are many musicians of reputation. Certainly the impromptu concert being given here, in quite homelike surroundings, is a welcome relief from the thundering of cannons and the screeching of shells. Beside the artistic performances, there are jovial war songs and sentimental ballads. In fact, all kinds of music, vocal, instrumental, and canned. With the mingling of nationalities in our unified battle lines, these concerts assume an international, or rather inter-allied aspect. It is not all music or fighting at the front. There are 101 little tasks that have to be performed. Among these is keeping the rifles clean and in first-class order. In this case, the men are favored with most comfortable surroundings, and you can scarcely realize that they are in the fighting zone. Not only the rifle, but the bayonet must be put in shape for work. And as they turn the grindstone, their thoughts doubtless go back to the time when they turned a grindstone on the farm or in the village with far different ends in mind. From the expression on their faces, you would never guess the grimness of the business at hand. And it is well that they can smilingly put an edge on the bayonet so that the Boche will get the point and get it first. The work of the telephone lineman in keeping the nervous system of the Army in repair is of great importance. The telephone system in the trenches and back of the lines is surprisingly complex, and bursting shells render it no small task to keep it intact. Much of the repair work has to be done under heavy fire so that the lineman's job is not a sinecure. Sometimes he is called on to go out into no man's land at night and tap one of the enemy's wires so as to get real inside information as to their plans. Fortunately, wireless telegraphy can be carried on through space without calling on the lineman to make connections. For this reason, it is playing a very important part in this war, both on land and the sea. Here is an improved field station. At such stations, messages are received from our captive balloons or even airplanes, telling what is going on behind the enemy's lines, what effect the artillery fire is having, and where to direct the shots. From these stations, the messages are communicated by phone or otherwise to the officers interested. While all these details are being attended to in the front trenches, the heavy artillery is drawn up back of the lines so that it can shoot over the heads of the infantry and pour its protecting barrage of fire in front of them to prepare the way for their advance, or to harass the enemy in general by pulverizing their trenches and pillboxes, breaking up their machine gun nests and observation posts, and silencing their batteries. The field piece shown here is of special interest, as it was the first American gun to hurl a shell at the Teuton trenches. It's now somewhere in the Lorraine sector, preparing the way for the onward march of humane civilization against educated, unhuman barbarism. Fortunately, the French are in a position to supply our army with adequate heavy field artillery until our shops can produce and our overseas tonnage is sufficient to transport the big guns that we need. Tardieu, High Commissioner of France to the United States, assures us that France can provide us by July 1st, 1918, with all the heavy artillery needed for 20 American divisions, or a little over 500,000 men. So we need have no fear that our soldiers will have ample artillery support from the very first. As we live peaceably here at home, we cannot imagine the conditions over there when miles and miles of these big guns belch forth, and answering miles and miles from the other side reply, while other guns of all calibers, down to the 1-pounders, together with the rifles, machine guns, and hand grenades, join in the hellish chorus. In front of the big guns come those of smaller caliber, which the 1-pounder shown here is an important element on account of its mobility. The observer with his field glass, the gunner and his assistants, the gun with its protecting shield for the gunner, and the recoil mechanism below are well shown in this picture of a light field piece in actual action. We have now followed our soldiers from their hometowns across the sea to the front, but have seen nothing of the most important department, the commissary. Whatever happens, the soldiers must be fed, for he is always hungry. To help provide for him is a chance we all have to prove our patriotism. Our soldiers need meat. Save it for them. It takes thousands of cattle every day to supply our present army, and it will take more later. The beef for the army in Europe is shipped in refrigerator cars to the seaboard, where it is transferred to refrigerators on the transports. On the other side, we have erected the largest cold storage houses in the world to receive this meat and other perishable products and store them until needed at the front, when it will be rushed in refrigerator cars to the quartermaster's depot near the trenches. Here it will be unloaded, as shown in this view, as fresh as when it left the abattoir. The quartermaster's depots are full of life as the trains bring in supplies to be stored, some to be rushed by motor truck to the different camp kitchens behind the lines. At the camp kitchens, these various and abundant supplies are unloaded, and soon the cooks and their assistants are busy preparing the meals. For feeding the men in the trenches, on the firing line, and during active operations, special field kitchens are used, which can be easily moved from place to place. Each stove is capable of cooking food for several hundred men. When mess is served in the active sector, it is less formal, but even more welcome. As we see them gathered round the steaming camp kitchen, can we begrudge them the little sacrifices we are called upon to make to ensure them abundant provisions? We are not asked to cut down our necessary food constituents, but to save and use the waste we have been accustomed to throw away, and to eat such foods as cannot be sent across the sea advantageously. As yet, we as a people have not hurt ourselves sacrificing to conserve food. Our ally, France, and to an almost equal extent England and other allies, have cut their civilian rations to the danger point, that their soldiers might be well fed. We must do our share and divide the burden. We must save consistently and wisely. And furthermore, we must increase our production of food. We must make our backyard or our farm produce the utmost possible, lest at mess time the smile fades from our soldiers' faces and the courage in their hearts fails from lack of nourishment, and that the war is lost because we, you and I, individually did not do our share. There is one other occasion of universal joy: the arrival of the mail from home. In the past, there's been delay in the delivery of the soldiers' mail, but the work is now being systematized so that in the future, delays will be reduced to a minimum. It must be remembered, however, that as our army is so widely distributed among the different divisions of Allied armies, that delays are inevitable. If the address is plainly written and correctly given, it will help. Also, be sure to spell out American and not simply AEF, lest the letter go to the Australian. There's joy for everyone who receives a letter when the bags from home are opened. But think of the poor fellow who is left out. If you know anyone over there, write him a letter of cheer with the accent on the cheer. Give him the details of what is going on in the hometown, especially the good news. Do not send a gloomy letter. That's not only unpatriotic, it's also aiding the enemy. If you're too blue to write a cheerful letter, don't write at all. Pack up your troubles in your old kit bag, not in the mail bag. And in your letters, smile, smile, smile. If you do not think that they need a smile, look at the cheerless desolation of no man's land, which they are facing day in and day out, in which they are exploring night in and night out. A region dead and in every sense above ground, but full of life below ground, as we shall see later. We enter a trench which one of our officers is inspecting and safely traverse it out of sight of the ever-watchful Boche with his trench periscope peeping over the edge of a trench a few hundred yards away. Through these zigzag trenches, the men pass in comparative safety during the daytime, and only occasionally being disturbed by a whistling shell or a burst of shrapnel. The trenches, however, are not continuous, but there are many gaps which can be crossed safely only at night. All such gaps are well covered by carefully placed machine guns. In the uncanny hours of night, under the cover of darkness, patrols from both sides sneak out into no man's land and try to find out what the other side is doing and planning. Should two such parties meet, they would signal for help, and soon the whole of no man's land would be lighted up bright as day by rockets, and for a few minutes, numerous machine guns would spit forth their streams of bullets, and then quiet would reign. For these parties are not out to fight unless they have to. Their mission is to get home with the information they have acquired. During the daytime, our sharpshooters are ever watchful to get a shot at some unwary Hun who shows his head above his trench. You will note the telephone wires running along the edge of the trench, seen just below the man's elbow. These are just two of the strands of the trench nervous system. That through peek holes in the sandbags, constant watch is kept for any movement on the part of the enemy, so that an attack or raid can be forestalled. Trench travel is not always a simple matter, for sometimes the rains cause the sides to cave in and the wire and faggot revetments give way so as to completely block the passage. Worse yet is the effect of the shells from the big guns constantly thundering far behind the German lines, which tear great craters in the ground, scattering the rocks and debris in all directions. Everywhere, sandbags are used to make an effective barricade and increase the depth of the trench. In fair weather, work in the trenches is not as bad as a soldier's life goes, but all the Americans would prefer to fight in the open. In rainy weather, however, the trenches in most places are transformed into veritable sloughs of despond, and the boardwalks, called duck walks by the English, are needed to keep the men from being mired. In the sides of the trenches are the ordinary dugouts for the soldiers, some of them as much as 20 or 30 feet below the surface of the ground. Here they can eat and sleep in peace while the cannons roar all about them. But while some sleep, others are on guard, and the sharpshooter here in the doorway of his dugout is fully equipped and ready for any emergency. There is a ban on mascots, but that does not prove that there are none of them with our army in France. Love will find a way, and a number of real live mascots hold their positions unmolested to bring luck to their camp or a trench. Such luck, reinforced by the skill and bravery of our men, brought this German prisoner, the first one captured by our troops, into our ranks. Probably it was a lucky day for the captive as well as the captors, for despite the unspeakable atrocities committed by the Huns on prisoners of war whom they have taken, we treat such men with humanitarian consideration. In view of the pictures we have been seeing, you will doubtless be interested to meet one of those who is responsible for many of these pictures. These are the only men we will allow to shoot into our ranks with impunity. However, securing pictures for our information is only an incident in the most important aids to the eyes of the Army. With it, the region back of the enemy trenches is photographed from airplanes, and the views obtained are so distinct that gunners, gun nests, ammunition dumps, movements of troops, and thousands of other points of military value can be seen at a glance. These photographic records are sent by motorcycle or messenger to headquarters, and with them the general map of the region, the general activities of the enemy, and the disposition of his troops can be accurately located. It is of great help to the engineers, one of whom is seen here, in preparing their maps and laying their plans. Having had a short furlough with the photographer, we return to the trenches just in time to be caught in a gas attack. Gas shells have been dropped, and the man with the auto horn is sounding the doleful alarm which will be relayed down the line of the trenches. Then, from the dugouts along the lines, these ghastly figures emerge, which you might fall down and worship without breaking the commandments, for they are nothing like in the heavens above or on the earth beneath or the waters under the earth. Fortunately, all our men are equipped with masks, which are absolute protection against these gas fumes. The barbarous Hun introduced the use of gas against all the mandates of civilized warfare. We are now not only prepared to protect ourselves against his attack, but also to give him a dose of his own medicine, probably an overdose. There is not time to more than mention our medical corps, the efforts of whose members in all sections of the front have been of the most efficient and heroic character. This station near the front line trenches is typical of the advanced positions in which they work. Here the wounded can be sheltered and receive temporary treatment in the midst of bursting shells until, under the cover of night, ambulances can carry them safely to the fully equipped hospitals well outside of the danger zone. A whole lecture or more could be devoted to the work of this branch of service. But as yet, we have sent to the front no legion of death, such as the regiment of women raised by the Russians early in the war. But we have a company of fair telephone operators who have been appointed to responsible, though not dangerous, positions in France. Their photograph was taken before they left for the Foreign Service, and it is fitting that we pay them our respects. So here's to our girls over there. We are at a disadvantage in the war because of our distance from the conflict and the difficulty of our leaders having the personal knowledge of the work and needs of our army and our allies in the field. However, the sea and the German submarine have not prevented our Secretary of War from crossing to the other side and obtaining first-hand information as to what we are doing and the condition of our army and its needs. Secretary Baker received a royal welcome, as was fitting, by the people as well as officials wherever he went. Here we see him as he came into the street in Paris, surrounded by a cheering crowd. It was with undisguised pride that he, with General Pershing, reviewed some of our troops in France. For there are no finer-looking soldiers or better figures to be found than those we have sent to France and those who are to follow. Secretary Baker reported their morale to be of the best and their physical condition excellent. We can rest assured that they will uphold the honor of our country through thick and thin until Prussian autocracy is absolutely crushed. To accomplish this end, we have entrusted the direction of our military activities to Secretary Baker and General Pershing, both men in whom we may place great confidence. In General Pershing, we have a broad-minded, energetic, typical American of sound judgment and quick action, who is fully measuring up to the high responsibilities laid upon him. Artillery is playing a very great part in modern warfare. Never before has it been used so extensively. Guns of all caliber are used, from the great 16-inch guns on railway carriages down to the one-pounders and machine guns. The British, in preparing for an offensive operation, placed their artillery so thick that the gun mounts stand wheel to wheel. In a recent battle on a front of 10 miles that lasted 6 days, 25 million shells of the 75mm caliber alone were used. Artillery is also one of the most expensive branches of warfare. The U.S. especially has had to even build plants for the manufacture of guns and ammunition. For the manufacture of these things, over $6 billion have already been appropriated, and much more will be needed. A single 16-inch gun and its railway mount costs $525,000, and each shell cost $1,000. Tanks cost $60,000 apiece. The baby cannon, the 37mm gun, cost $1,500 apiece. Already, over 110,000 machine guns have been turned out, entailing an enormous outlay in money. On the other hand, artillery is the best life insurance that we can buy for our soldiers over there. It is the surest guarantee of victory. We can, with our dollars, lay down a barrage that will save countless American lives as our men go forward against the enemy. As they're going over the top these days, exhibiting such fighting qualities that have brought to them the admiration of all the world, our great commander is today calling on us in the second line of defense to bring up the support that is necessary for those in the front line. The boys out there are giving their lives. We are only asked to give our money. And what a paltry contribution to make. How inconsiderable in comparison with theirs. Some of the boys won't come back at all. Some will come back with empty sleeves, with limbs gone, eyes out, and worse still, with a vacant stare where intelligence formerly shone, crazed by the hell of battle. The government can't replace these things. They're gone forever. All we are asked to do is to lend, not to give. To lend what? Our arms, legs, eyes, lives? No, just dollars, and to lend them in the safest possible way. When you buy a Liberty bond, you're making the safest investment in the world. Individuals sometimes fail to pay back what they borrow. Banks fail. Governments never fail unless they are disrupted by the heel of the conqueror. And in that case, your money is lost in whatever form you have it. Currency is valueless. Lands are valueless. As long as these are good, the government bonds are the best security in the world. The campaign is on today. Don't fail to do your duty. The finger of duty is pointing at every man, woman, and child in this house tonight, saying, do your duty by the boys over there. The man or woman who can buy a bond and won't is a slacker of the meanest sort. He's not worthy of the name American. Then let us come up like American men and women, like the fathers and brothers, mothers and sisters of our American soldiers, and say to the boys over there, lay on, boys, we're backing you up. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Questions, comments, observations, etc.? I'm a school teacher. I sort of like everything. What did